The death of China hands, people, scholars, experts who were once able to be the bridge that crossed between the US and China or Europe, who got to enjoy speaking at conferences and different forums, seem to have fallen out of favor in the eyes of Beijing. And with the way that the current regime is running, the concept of China hands may cease to exist very soon. What exactly is a China hand? Somebody who is very well versed in the relationship between China and another country, particularly they are from that country, namely the United States or others. It's been an important bridge in the relationship, the bilateral relationship. And some of the most important aspects of, for example, say the US-China relationship has been built by people like Henry Kissinger or people that more recently like Michael Pillsbury, who has been able to get in China, be able to seek audience with top CCP officials, to even offer advice in some cases. These people, they're very much in tune and close to that of Beijing, yet they can still have an impact on the bilateral relationship because there is such an important influence back in the days. But today, something fundamentally has changed. Since Xi Jinping, however, the radicalization, this version of the totalitarian government, has pushed away a lot of these China hands because they no longer enjoy the same benefits they had once enjoyed under a different leader of the past. Simply because the rule of the game has changed. The club was taken over. So those that enjoy the last iteration before Xi Jinping still wished that this version would continue on with Xi Jinping. And it didn't look like that anymore. And we've seen this total recall to that of the Mao Zedong era, which is way before the idea of China hand would exist. And so for many of these people, it feels like they suddenly lost what once China was attracted to, which is their expertise and their connections. It seems like they're not needed anymore. And of course, many also started to voice their concerns with the state of China right now, in particular, post-zero COVID. And because in many of these people's eyes, they're not all just CCP mouthpieces or CCP goons. They're in fact experts in their respective fields, like say the economy. So what they were trying to do was offer a sound criticism, trying to help the regime to improve. But we've gotten to a state today where any little bit of criticism is already deemed to be treacherous. And this includes criticisms from the old friends of China, those that once were considered friends. These Westerners are now seen as the enemies. And that's precisely what happened to two men. One name is Stephen Roach, and the other is Jörg Woelke. There are two well-known economic experts that have been to China for many decades. Stephen Roach is the former chairman of Morgan Stanley Asia and was once the chief economist for Morgan Stanley. He recently wrote a post on his page called What's the Point?, in which he details that in a recent trip to the China Development Forum, which happens annually, it's a critical economics forum that's supposed to help contribute or seek advice from experts, especially those from the West. Now, this year, it left a sour taste in his mouth because he was told prior to the event that because he had written things that were basically offending the regime, that he was not allowed to talk this year, and his paper was not allowed to be circulated either. So he details that your recent comments on the Chinese economy have generated intense scrutiny and even controversy among Chinese and international press. It is very likely that whatever you say at CDF in a public setting will be misinterpreted and even sensationalized by media, which is not in the best interest for you or us. And in fact, Stephen Roach has also voiced concern with the end of Hong Kong. This year, he also written a paper that says Hong Kong's current state is basically marching towards the end of its once glorious economic prosperity, and now it's basically become a situation where jobs are lost, stores are closing down. So it's the end of a great city. And that was also drawing a lot of angers from the state because you can't say that Hong Kong's fallen. So it seems like Roach is facing an awakening at the moment because he even said himself, for the past 24 years, he was able to attend the CDF, right, the China Development Forum, and he was offered a speaking role, yet this year something fundamentally changed. And simply because I think now he realized that there's this new version, this totalitarian model under Xi is a totally different one to what he's used to, the version of China that he was involved with. In fact, in the article, he talks about wanting to go back to the version of China, this China Development Forum ran by former Premier Zhu Rongji, who basically was in the 90s and early 2000s. But that's a wishful thinking. It's a pipe dream because there's no way that China would go back to that state unless the CCP collapses. And I think the problem isn't necessarily with them. It's more like that the Chinese regime, the Communist Party, is embracing Mao Zedong's this idea of orthodox communism, where they want to go back to the Cultural Revolution in this new era. They want to do all sorts of political movements. And so in that sense, you can't stop this trend that they're going on. And with that, right, you basically have the idea that anything the CCP says, for example, with the economy, it's doing super well. Everybody else knows it's not doing really well. But because that's the exact command from the top saying that the economy is doing well, everybody in China has to sing the same song. It has to say the economy is doing well, right? So to the outside world, especially if you're an economic expert, you begin to get confused because you're like, well, according to what I know about the economy, what's really happening in China, it's not doing well. But if you dare to say anything about it, then you become the bad one. And I think they don't really understand that. So in comes Mr. Roach, who's trying to offer sound advice to Beijing. And what did he get instead? He just got censored. Everybody knows that the current path Xi Jinping is walking on is problematic for the economy. Everybody knows it. Do they really think that there's no economist in China who is rational enough, smart enough to realize that the current ways don't work? Obviously there are, but they're just much smarter because they don't dare to say stuff because they know that's going to get their heads chopped. Right? It's like precisely that this medicine is the right cure for the disease, but they just don't want it. Like aspirin is the right cure, but they just want Tylenol. And they keep saying that Tylenol is the best, right? Or that they just say that I'm not sick. And so the same thing with Mr. Woke. Basically, he in 2022 offered a letter in secret to the State Council where he voiced criticism against zero COVID because it's terrible for the economy, right? You're literally shutting down an entire city for months on end. So the city's not running, you can't make money. And so to anybody at the time would think that this is pretty rational. Zero COVID is not a good thing for the economy, right? Well, that letter got leaked. And because it criticized zero COVID as ineffective, it seems like he also fell out of favor with Beijing as well. For example, here's what it reads exactly in his answer. He says, I wrote a confidential letter to the State Council, which was then leaked and caused a huge discussion that put me on the spot. Being someone trying to bring nuances to the policy and an outspoken advocate of a change that was not supported by the Politburo, that was a very difficult moment for me. Now, like again, I said, everybody knew that the zero COVID situation was very ineffective, but that's not where Xi is thinking, right? Because Xi Jinping thinks of it as a political struggle, as a power struggle tool, in one where they can lock down his oppositions. And so because zero COVID is the number one political tool of Xi Jinping, if you defy zero COVID, you're essentially defying Xi Jinping. Because everything the CCP does is a power struggle. And this took place ahead of the 20th Party Congress when Xi was trying to put in his own people and to sort of silence the oppositions from wanting to kick him out. And so to do that, he needed some really, really, really big measure that could solidify his chance for a third term, and that was zero COVID. Right? It doesn't make sense, right? Because zero COVID destroyed perhaps the only city in China that was making a lot of money, which was Shanghai. Because everywhere else, there's like mounting local debt, infrastructures, mounting debt from the local financing vehicles, non-performing loans. All of these things were piling up. And she still decided to shut down cities like Shanghai for a few months just because he needed that political draconian measure on the outside, but a political struggle tool on the inside. And so in the post-recovery, since they lifted the lockdown in early or late 2022, well, we basically saw unemployment among youth record high. We also saw foreign investors leaving. We saw the lack of consumptions. We saw basically just unable to recover from the damage that it caused for the 3 years of the draconian lockdown. Basically, in that environment, if you're not as radical or you're not on the same page as the regime, you're basically seen as a traitor. And anybody that dares to offer criticism, well, that criticism is not going to land well with Xi Jinping, who's walking down this path of absolute correctness, right? It's basically this cult of personality. He's absolutely correct. Nothing he says is wrong. And so we're really looking at the creation of another North Korea here, another Kim family. But in reality, that's just the original or the orthodox version of communism. Because I think many of these people, the China hands, they come from this era where the center of attention was corruption and making money. This was the 90s and 2000s, right? Under the reform and opening up banner, it was all about making money. And so China was seeing the political stage was taking a back step and the economic stage was taking a centerfold. So economic construction seemed like it was all over China. China was developing, right? But the political situation was not changing. We had just left 1989 and there was the Tiananmen Square massacre. And so within the 10 years time, it seems like people, well, started to prosper. Not really, because there was still political persecution. There were still arrests. There were still dissidents being harmed in China. None of it changed. But it's just within that time, you could brush aside all of the political changes and just look on the economy side. But then because in the post-zero COVID era, the economy is also doing bad, well, now all of the issues have been exposed. And that's exactly where we are today. Because now the political focus is much heavier in China, it doesn't align with the needs of the businesses or the investors. And so this market-oriented mind is no longer there. Now it's all about political stability. So people like economic experts, China hands, that were once seen as friends of China, they don't realize that they were just a disposable tool for the moment. And once that moment passes, they're no longer needed. Another big reason is that China hands were great at painting the image of China as a nice and friendly neighbor, right? They needed that under this hide and bide sort of mode of operation when Deng Xiaoping basically, after 1989, told the party to lay low and to basically not show its strength. And then Xi Jinping came into power and decided that China's strong enough and started to be all aggressive and stuff and basically exposed all of these things to the public. So slowly people realized that actually, well, what they were painting on the outside, this mask that they were wearing, was part of it contributed to people like China hands who are helping to create this image, but that's slowly waning away. So now you see the nakedness of what's happening in China today. All right, that's it today for the episode on why China hands may be dying as a concept, of course. If you enjoy the content, leave a like, comment below your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, bye-bye.